For number 22, we're headed back to the African mainland with Cameroon. This is another border country like Angola or Zambia, straddling regions. In this case, it's Central and West Africa. Geography. Cameroon is shaped like a triangle, divided into north and south zones separated by the Adamawa Plateau. The north is drained by the Benue River and Lake Chad. South, the Cameroon Plateau gives way to the coastal plain, hemmed in northwest by the Cameroon Highlands, the northeastern extension of the Cameroon Line Islands. These craggy mountains are volcanic, either dead or dormant, with the notable exception of Mount Cameroon, rising like a giant out over the sea. Located in the tropics, temperatures don't vary much through the year, though the highlands are cooler. Southern Cameroon has no or a very short dry season, about December to March, and a very long and very rainy wet season. The windward side of Mount Cameroon can get over 400 inches, 10,000 millimeters, of rain a year, making it one of the world's wettest places. Further north, the climate dries considerably, until around Lake Chad rain is so scarce it's a desert. Cameroon has been called Africa in miniature, due to its varied landscapes. From the coastal mangroves rise the northwestern extensions of the Central African rainforests, which transition across the Sanaga River to those of West Africa. The highlands were once covered in cooler forest, but have since been burnt and hewn by fire and axe, cleared as the grass fields. In the drier north, trees thin out into mosaic before becoming the wide savannas of the Sudan, an old name for all Africa south of the mighty Sahara. Between the Sahara and Sudan stretches a belt of dry shrubs, grassland, and trees called the Sahel. Such a diverse country hosts a wide array of plants and animals, including all our familiar African critters. The rivers, estuaries, and sea also teem with life. First, Cameroonians. Now, humans have lived on this earth for millions of years, almost certainly originating in Africa, if we weren't seeded by aliens in the distant past. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, are 300,000 years old. Exactly where we originated is disputed, but we steadily spread and outcompeted and interbred with all remaining species of man. What makes Cameroon special is some 2,500,000, quarter of a million, years ago, there lived a man somewhere in West Central Africa. We'll probably never know his name or even find his remains, but according to genetic studies, he was the last common male ancestor of everyone, you, me, your neighbor, alive today. They call him the chromosomal Adam, as every living human sprang from his loins. Now, that doesn't mean he was the Adam, the first man, just that all other male lineages have gone extinct except his. North of the jungle, Central Africa grades into West Africa, meaning here in Cameroon we have our first encounter with the first men of Guinea, as Cameroon Adam's children broke off into different directions, colonizing the lands of Africa and beyond. A stock dwelt in the forests and savanna south of the Sahara. There they hunted and gathered, similarly to their pygmy neighbors whom they interacted with. Exactly what these ancient West Africans looked like is hard to say, because around 20,000 years ago, as the Ice Age reached its apex, another stock of men, the people of the Nile Valley and eastern Sudan, the tall, ebony-skinned folk, steadily moved southwest. The lineage of West African Aborigines has long since been subsumed through thousands of years of intermingling with these Nilo-Sahelians, synthesizing a new hybrid people, the Neo-West Africans. Niger-Congolese, Nilo-Saharans, and Chadians. The story will be expanded when we reach West Africa, but under strain from the drying of the Sahara, from green savanna into deep desert it is now. Over 5,000 years ago, the people of the Upper Niger accomplished what few others have. Domesticated plants. Specifically, they cultivated pearl millet, sorghum, African rice, and other crops. This ancient Niger farming culture is poorly known, but scholars have suggested they spoke a language that evolved not only into those of modern West Africa, but also our buddies, the Bantu. This theory has been challenged, but either way, agriculture steadily spread south and east along the many rivers of West Africa. By 5,000 years ago, the farm folk reached the lower Niger River. The spread then continued east along the savannas. By 2500 BC, the cultural unity of this farmer zone inevitably breaks apart. Those east of the Niger River, along the Benue, become the Benue-Congo people, though of course they've yet to move into the Congo Basin. Crossing the Cameroon highlands, they encounter and supersede the native pygmies of the jungle. The farm folk east of the Shebsi Mountains become the Savannah's peoples. Meanwhile, descendants of the old Nilo-Sahelians who remained in the east evolved into the Nilotes of Sudan, a pastoral people herding cattle, sheep, and goats from the Levant. They responded to the drying by migrating to surviving bodies of water like Lake Chad. The Central Sudanians journey from their home around Bahr al-Ghazal. The east kin settle in the North Congo waters, while the west go to the valley of the Shari River. Another folk, called the Saharans, came from somewhere in the center of the now desert, settling north of Lake Chad. And in the valleys of the upper Sangha, Ubangi, and Sanaga rivers, the Ubangians emerge, spreading east. Westwards, the Benue Congo folk, maybe more correctly the Benue Cameroonians, diverge into central Nigerians in the lowlands and Bantoid cross people in the highlands and the area of the Cross River. Soon the cross peoples break away, leaving the Bantoids in the highlands. The Bantoids expand south to the lands north of the Ogowe Valley, leaving pockets of pygmies in the deep jungle. The Bantoids are an imprecise agglomeration of various peoples similar enough to the Bantu, who, in fact, arose from this collection along the lowlands of the Wuri, Mount Mananguba, and south of the Sanaga. Just brushing the northern extremity of Cameroon, the Chadians will get more love in videos to come. They speak languages related to those of North Africa, of Egypt, the Maghreb, the Levant, and Arabia. Their genetics indicate partial ancestry from North Africa and Western Eurasia, the result of an ancient fusion of those folk with the natives here. These Chadians settle south of Lake Chad, adopting much of the culture of their neighbors. Bantu. We've been talking about the Bantu people since the very beginning, and we're not quite done. But here in southern Cameroon is their purported homeland. So let's talk about them some. The ancient Bantu were farmers like their kin, living in clans and fortified villages. Their population density was low, and in a dangerous land of wild beasts and wild men, they became fierce warriors. They worshipped many spirits, both of the natural world and of the deceased. It varied from group to group, but the ancestral Bantu likely held special reverence for a supreme spirit or deity, later equated with the God of Abraham when Islam and Christianity arrived. Skipping the Bronze Age entirely, the Bantu either invented or acquired iron technology roughly 3,000 years ago, becoming skilled metalworkers. But as much as we love the Bantu, they're not the only stars in Cameroon. While they begin spreading deep into Central and Southern Africa, the civilizations of West Africa take shape. West African kingdoms. The domestication of the camel made possible the crossing of the Sahara, and this is traditionally thought to have spurred on the development of West African civilization. Mediterranean markets developed a need for Sahelian goods, mainly gold and salt, but also slaves. Recently, however, archaeological work has demonstrated that maybe cities arose before the caravans spread across the desert, raising the possibility of another independent cradle of civilization. Either way, by the first millennium BC, walled cities had emerged around the lower Shari River. Known to scholars as the Sao civilization, various modern groups claim to be their successors, suggesting they spoke many languages, unified by common culture. They were adept metalworkers and potters, but remained a cluster of city-states, never unifying into a grand empire like those in Mesopotamia or Egypt. While the Sao flourish, they and the Cameroonians south diverge into newer groups as time passes. This is the ethnogenesis portion of the program, and we'll start in the north and go down. The Saharans along Lake Chad become the Kanembu. The Chadians on the other side of the lake split into western, central, eastern, and southern branches. The Savannah's people break off into the Leko west of the High Benue and the Mbum east. The west central Sudanians become the North Bagirmi and South Sara. The central Nigerians east of the Benue become the Jukun. The Ubangians of Cameroon become the Gbaya, while the nearby Pygmies adopt a similar language as the Baka. The non-Bantu Bantoids split into north and south groups, really east and west, along the Mbam River. All this divergence is speculative, because we don't have written records of these languages in transition, like we do for Latin and all the European languages that descend from it. But a little later, we'll say, the Bantu also begin their split. The Bantu of Cameroon are almost entirely of the northwestern group. By the mid-first millennium, the central Chadians split into north and south by about the watershed divide between the Benue and Lake Chad. The South Chadians, too, split into North Masana and South Peve, who moved towards the Benue River. This probably hastens the breakup of the Mbum into northern Mundang along the Mayo Kebi. central Karang in the Vina, and the southern Mbum themselves north of the Jerim. The Lecco likewise become the western Mumuye between the Shebshi and Atlantika mountains, central Lecco between the Atlantika and Adamawa, and eastern Duru in the Adamawa. The western Sara become the Ungambai. The North Bontoids fragment into the Takar of the upper Mbam, the Daka in the Shebshi mountains, and the Mambiloids elsewhere. The South Bontoids become the Mbam north of the Sanaga. Those of the Grassfields become the Grassfielders. The Tivoid Beboids dwell northwest of the Cameroon line. The Mamfe in the High Cross, the Bendi, form east of the Anyim, while west is the Ekoi, who move into the Cross Valley, splitting the people there into Upper and Lower Cross, or the Ibibio peoples. The Bantu north of the Wuri become the Sawa Bantu. Those around Mount Manenguba become the Manenguba. The Bassa emerge on the other side of the Wuri. Beyond the Nyong River and into the plateau, the Beti form, fathers of the Fang. But to the east, in the jungles of the deep plateau, the Pomo Bomwali live, and soon some Bassa move into the lower Mbam, becoming the Bafia. Sometime in the 8th century or so, the Kanembu found their own kingdom called Kanem, commanding the Saharan trade routes. Alright, I know it's a lot, but bear with me, okay? Third phase. North-central Chadians become the Kapsiki in the Mandara Mountains, the Muskum in the Logone Valley, the Margi west of there, and Mofu east. The south-central Chadians become the northern Mafa, central Daba, and southern Bata. The Mambiloids divide into the Mambila north of the Mbam, and the Vute south. Some of the Grassfielders move northwest, dividing the Tiv from the Bebe. The hills and valleys of the Grassfields are the perfect place for regional isolation, and just so the Grassfielders gather up into the North Ringers after the yet-to-be-built Ring Road, western Momo, northeastern Nkambe, the southwestern Bamiliki, the southeastern Bamum, and the central Ngemba along the tall ridges of the highlands. The Mamfe become the upper Kenyang and the lower Denya, and then the Mbam finally break into the western Tunen, middle Yambasa, and eastern Tuki. The Sawabantu become the Kwe west of Mount Cameroon, the Douala east, and the Oroko north. And lastly, the Pomo Bomwali split into the Pomo of the Nyong River and the Bomwali in the Sangha, while some Baka adopt a Congo Bantu language as the Aka. Alright, just give me a moment to make sure I got everybody. Yeah, goodness, just take a look at all this. Congo-Kinshasa is a big and diverse country, speaking over 200 languages. Cameroon, despite being a fifth the size, may speak even more, over 250. Anyway, back to the rise of West African civilization. Western Chadians, the Hausa, form a series of kingdoms in the Sudan, encouraging neighboring peoples to organize in kind. The Jukun form their own kingdom of Quara Rafa. From the trans-Saharan trade routes, Arab merchants and scholars begin settling Lake Chad and spreading Islam across the Sahel, along with writing, literature, architecture, and other aspects of Muslim civilization. Kanem expands across Lake Chad into Sao lands, creating a fusion Kanuri people. But dynastic conflicts allow a Bagirmi clan to overthrow that of Kanem in 1380, causing them to relocate to their recent conquests, creating the successor state, Bornu. By the mid-15th century, a Muslim people from the river Senegal in the far west, the Fulani, migrate steadily throughout the Islamic kingdoms of West Africa, making their way to Hausaland and Bornu. There they offer their talents as great scholars, artisans, and herders. Other migrations took place at the dawn of the early modern period. The maritime Sawabantu, links between West Africa and Congo to the south, spread south. There they become Malimba at the Sanaga's mouth and the Yassa at the Intems. An offshoot of the Malimba, the Batanga, are familiar from Equatorial Guinea. A branch of the Bomwali, the Ngumba, settled just east of them, joined by pygmies in a likely patron-client relationship. The Giele. This caused the coastal trade routes to expand, and Ambibios formed their own city-states to take advantage of this. Not content with conquering Kanem, other Bagirmi formed their own sultanate in 1522, while the remaining independent south cities are conquered by Bornu in their quest to subjugate Old Kanem. By 1600, Bagirmi joins the host of Bornu's bannermen. A war with another sultanate, Wadai, enables Bornu to finally reunify with Kanem. Fulani Jihad. The opening of the Atlantic trade meant merchants could bypass the desert for the ocean, and while Guinea prospered from European trade, the Sahel fell into decline. In a bid to rejuvenate the region, to bring Islam to the pagan folk, or to punish those who were not sufficiently adhering to Islamic law. The Fulani led their own jihads, holy wars, in the west beginning in the 18th century. Their people, now in the Benue Valley, the movement spread eastwards until at the beginning of the 19th century, the largest and most successful such jihad began. 1804, Usman Dan Fodio conquered the Hausa states and founded a caliphate of Sudan, more well known as Sokoto after its capital. The jihad saw Bornu's capital destroyed and Kwara Rafa conquered in 1808. The next year it expanded into the high Benue and Adamawa Plateau, named after its conqueror, Emir Mobido Adama. Like most empires, once the initial brutality of conquest was over, the greater peace and stability allowed the region to prosper. Agriculture flourished, schools were founded, but also slavery became a major sector. Even if European powers no longer engaged in the transatlantic slave trade, there were plenty of markets in Africa and the Middle East. German Cameroon. Now, I could have begun the video by saying modern Cameroon starts in 1884 when Germany colonized the country. But what I like about this series is I went through all the trouble setting up the stage for this. Germans weren't the first mariners to explore Cameroon. Hanno the Navigator was a Carthaginian explorer who, sometime in the 5th century BC, sailed beyond the Pillars of Hercules to the coast of Guinea, sighting a volcano, probably Mount Cameroon. Apparently, they also encountered a race of hairy, savage men they called the Gorillae. Whether or not this is actually what these people were, naturalists later named the gorilla after the story. Anyway, our friends the Portuguese were the first Europeans to blaze the sea lanes to Guinea in the mid-15th century. In 1472, they reached the Wuri estuary, absolutely teeming with swarms of ghost shrimp. Naturally, they called it the River of Shrimp, Rio dos Camarões. The Spanish carried this as Cameroon, and that's how we get modern Cameroon. The Portuguese didn't establish much of a presence on the mainland, preferring the safety of their islands in the Cameroon line. Instead, they let the Sawabantu be their middlemen, who became wealthy and powerful, facilitating trade of ivory and slaves from the interior to the coast and beyond the Atlantic. By the latter 19th century, Britain and France were establishing their own presence along the Gulf of Guinea, and tensions for control of African trade and resources were heating up. Germany had never been much of a colonial power, but with Germany freshly unified and expanding economically, German merchants established trade posts in the Cameroon estuary. Soon, local chiefs allowed them to start fruit and cocoa plantations. The German government originally wanted nothing to do with overseas colonies, a waste of time, money, and energy better spent in Europe. But merchant calls for state protection and a growing public mood to get in on the colonial game forced Otto von Bismarck's hand. 1884, just as in the Namib Desert, Germany established a colony along the Wuri estuary, roughly between the Cameroon Highlands and the Ntem River, called Cameroon, centered in Douala. Later that year, a conference was held in Berlin to regulate a new scramble for Africa amongst the great powers. Countries hurried to secure treaties with local leaders and negotiate boundaries with neighboring powers, legitimizing their colonies. Early 1885, the conference ended, and the race was on. Spain claimed Rio Muni, and Britain the Ibibio states. Germany and Britain agreed to split the area along the Akwayafe River, north through some lines to a dry creek of the Cross River, up it until a line going to a western spur of the highlands, the Sonkwala Mountains, giving the High Cross, or the Manyu, to Cameroon. South, Spain abandoned its claims up the Niger River and settled on the Ntem River up to about 2 degrees 20 minutes north due east. Cameroon extended to the Congo watershed, where France had right. 1886, the British-Germany line extended northeast, skirting the edge of the highlands until it ended just east of Yola. This brought Adamawa and the grass fields into Germany's zone, though they remained defiant of these would-be conquerors. 1889, Yaoundé is founded to anchor German control of the interior. 1890, the Anglo-German Treaty settles matters in Africa, such as in Namibia, but also clarifies some poorly surveyed borders in Cameroon. 1893, the western boundary is brought north all the way to Lake Chad. This gives Germany access to the trade routes into the Sahara, or rather it would if some troublesome native states weren't in the way. Rabi Az-Zubair was a Sudanese warlord who conquered Bagirmi and Bornu, becoming emir of the latter. As the Lion of Lake Chad, he and his army terrorized the people of the region, depopulating and plundering settlements. This caused concern amongst Europeans, especially France when they claimed the Chad Basin in 1894. By 1900, Rabi was killed at the Battle of Kuseri, restoring the sheiks to Borno. 1901, Buea becomes the capital of Cameroon, just in time for power struggles leading to the division of Borno between Britain, Germany, and France in 1902. The Sokoto Caliphate, after warring with Britain and Germany for several years, was finally brought to heel, partitioned by the victors in 1903. But Muslim rebels held out until in 1907 they and the last of the Grassfielder chiefs were crushed by the German Schutztruppe. In 1908, with the region calming down, Germany and France determined the border. From Lake Chad, it traveled up the Shari River, then went west to the Lagone River, down to the 10th degree north latitude, following lines west, a little southwest, then southeast, cutting a triangle to the Mbere River, maintaining French control of important settlements. The border continued up the Mbere, then the Ungu, along some lines to the Lom River, 2 more lines down the Kadai River, hopping across to the Bumba River, back to the Kadai, through another line to the Nue River, down to the Sanga River, up the Ungoko to about 2 degrees north, due west to the Ivindo River, up to where it becomes the Aina, until going overland to the Kolb River, continuing down the Intem, up the Kie to the 2nd degree 10 minutes north latitude, to go west and join the Rio Muni border. 1911, France traded land in Africa for control over Morocco in the Agadir crisis, extending Cameroon east to the Lagone River, south into French Gabon and Congo, giving it access to the Congo River, creating outer Noi Cameroon. Strangely, Cameroon was pulled back from the Shari River. German Cameroon became known for its efficient plantation economy and infrastructure with rail and telegraph lines, but German authority was ruthlessly enforced. Brutal punishments meted out to rebellious natives like mutilations and forced labor. The Germans were probably ill-missed when the First World War broke out, and the Entente occupied the colony by 1916. 1919, the Peace of Versailles assigned Cameroon to both Britain and France, though as Britain wasn't too into it, France got the lion's share. French and British Cameroons. Cameroon became a League of Nations mandate of both Britain and France, to be relinquished when such a time came as it could rule itself. Together they became known as the Cameroons. French ruled from Yaoundé, British from Buea. Noi Cameroon was returned to France, who also kept the little nubbin east of the Lagone. As convenient as it would have been, French Cameroon was not technically a French colony and could not be added to French Equatorial Africa, though Britain ruled their portion from Nigeria. 1931, the boundary was formally agreed on. From Lake Chad, it follows the Ebedi River, going south and then west along the Mandara Mountains, across the high Benue and the Atlantica Mountains, then along the divide of the Cameroon Highlands. Maybe to separate the majority Muslim northern section from the Christian and pagan southern, Britain divided their portion into northern and southern Cameroon along the Donga River and the edge of the highlands. Britain and France had different approaches to governing the Cameroons. Britain allowed local leaders to manage their own affairs, content with establishing mines and even allowing German plantation owners to return. France, on the other hand, wanted to de-Germanify Cameroon, replacing German with French and subjecting the people to assimilation policies, and importing their harsh extractive practices from French Congo. The 1940 fall of France weakened the colonial hold over Cameroon, and though it remained with Free France, by 1948 independence movements were springing up. Repression was harsh, and with arrests, brutality, even deaths. Starting in 1955, guerrillas bedeviled French forces, starting the Cameroon War. It was fairly mild, especially compared to the concurrent Algerian War, but it was enough for France to reverse course. 1958, the United Nations requested France give Cameroon the option of independence, which voted yes. January 1st, 1960, French Cameroon became the independent République du Cameroun, Republic of Cameroon. Republic of Cameroon. Amadou Ahidjo became the Republic's first president. He was a moderate who wished to maintain strong ties with France, allowing French money and advisors to continue to influence the nation. This, of course, upset many radical Cameroonian nationalists and Marxists. Meanwhile, the British Cameroons was sitting awkwardly between Free Cameroon and the freshly minted Federation of Nigeria. A plebiscite was held. Muslim-majority Northern Cameroon wished to join Nigeria, while Christian-majority Southern Cameroon wished to unite with the Republic. But some guarantees were expected. Largely English-speaking West Cameroon was wary of the far larger French-speaking Cameroon Oriental, and thus joined under the condition of a federal constitution to maintain their autonomy, creating the Federal Republic of Cameroon. Because of Ahidjo's pro-French policy, the Cameroon War continued until 1964, ended with French aid. The war, however, allowed him to assume emergency powers. Crackdowns included curtailment of civil rights in the name of public safety. 1966, he declared a one-party state under the Cameroonian National Union. 1972, a new constitution was enacted, fusing the two states into one united Republic of Cameroon. Despite amounting to a dictator, Ahidjo wasn't a megalomaniac like Mobutu in Congo-Zaire, nor a vicious lunatic like Nguema in Equatorial Guinea. Cameroon remained fairly stable and experienced steady growth, especially in 1977 when oil production began. 1982, Ahidjo resigned in favor of Paul Biya. Biya soon managed to sideline Ahidjo from the party and took steps to democratization, renaming the country back to the Republic of Cameroon in 1984. That year, a failed coup by Ahidjo's supporters put a stop to that process, and Ahidjo spent the rest of his life in exile. As we've seen elsewhere, the end of the Cold War meant the West's tolerance for one-party regimes collapsed, and 1992 multi-party elections were held. But this revealed grave structural problems with Cameroon itself. The election was contested between Biya, a French-speaking Christian, John Fru Ndi, an English-speaking Christian, and Bello Maigari, a French-speaking Muslim. Biya just barely won, though subsequent elections have seen him have a far easier time, leading to allegations of election fraud. Democratization also inflated hopes for the residents of former West Cameroon for greater autonomy, even a restoration of federalism. But no. The Bakassi Peninsula in the extreme southwest of Cameroon was administered from Nigeria in colonial times. Nigeria continued to claim the area, especially after oil was discovered, leading to border clashes in the 1980s. Finally, in 2002, the International Court of Justice, citing old colonial documents, ruled that Bakassi belonged to Cameroon. Paul Biya was supposed to leave office in 2011, but has since removed term limits and remains president of Cameroon, having ruled for 43 years as of 2025. Under his tenure, ethnic divisions aggravate the republic. 2014, the Islamic terrorist organization Boko Haram spread its violence from Nigeria into northern Cameroon, terrorizing the people there. 2018 operations stopped most of their activities, but low-level insurgency remains. What's more, the English-speaking Cameroonians of the southwest are dissatisfied with the pro-French central policy, agitating for either further autonomy, a federal system, or outright independence as Ambazonia, after Ambas Bay. Starting in 2017, the situation has escalated into more insurgency. Besides this instability, Cameroon suffered recession back in the 80s, from which it hasn't truly recovered, but is able to float its debt with oil revenues. It has a well-developed agricultural sector and is investing in mining. Poverty is lower than much of the rest of Africa. If Cameroon can solve its ethnic tensions and democracy deficit, it'll have a lot going for it. Not to mention its national football team is among the best in Africa. Boy, Cameroon sure was fun. Rich history, rich environment, rich culture, even got a little peek at West Africa. Well, next time, we're going to round off Central Africa with, ironically, the Central African Republic. See you then.